Hello and welcome to Mr. Horvath's Rocket Lab. This is where I build rockets and sometimes repair rockets. But today we're doing a build video to cover the build process of the Estes Wizard. That Wizard kit is an excellent little build. It's very similar to the build video that I just did, the Viking kit. So if you get your hands on this, there's already a build video that you can follow along with. The only real difference between these two kits is the fin design on the Viking is a little bit different than on the Wizard. Both fly very well, and they're fun builds. So today we're going to get right into it. We're going to follow step by step through the instructions and get through so that we can have a rocket to fly on Rocket Day. All right, so your teacher should have passed out a Ziploc baggie for you. That Ziploc baggie should have your name on it, and I recommend that you write your name on all the pieces. We also have, if you're building the Wizard kit, they should have given you a bag that looks just like this with all the pieces in it. So what you need to do is to take all of these pieces out of this bag and put it in a Ziploc baggie. That's just what I like to do so that all those little pieces don't get lost. We need to keep them all safe and protected, and only take out the piece that you're working with so that you don't lose anything. We only have enough for one rocket per person, so if you lose a piece, it's going to be hard to continue the build process. Okay? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out the instruction manual for this, and we're going to take a look at the first page of the instructions. The first page, it gives you kind of a blown up view of all of the pieces and how they're all going to be assembled. On the bottom of the piece, on the bottom of the instructions, we've got a couple of pieces that we're going to cut out. And I'll talk about that when we get to it, but at least we know where those are at. Opening the instructions to the first page, the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on the nose cone. So let's go ahead and take out those two pieces of your nose cone. We've got the nose cone itself and then the cap that is going to be glued in. So those are the two white pieces that are in there. Digging through this, I have my nose cone ready to go, and the white piece that we're talking about is inside this small bag that has your fins and your streamer. Some rockets fly with a parachute. A little bit heavier rockets use parachutes. These rockets are very light, so they don't need a heavy parachute. They just need a streamer, and the streamer does the exact same thing as a parachute. It adds to the aerodynamic drag, and it also slows it down so that it will have a safe recovery. All right, so I've opened up this bag, and inside this we've got that little plastic piece. Again, put everything back that you're not using. This is going to require the use of some plastic cement. The plastic cement is in your teacher's build box. Your teacher may hand this to you to use, or your teacher may prefer to use this himself or herself so that they have control over how much glue you're going to use. You don't need a lot of this, and you're going to hear me say throughout this video again and again, you only need a little bit of glue. And as a student, I see a lot of students just using way too much glue. And you don't need to use a lot of glue, especially with this. If you use too much glue on this, it will melt the plastic, it'll deform the plastic, and it doesn't turn out very well. So a little bit goes a very long way. So depending on how your teacher feels about it, they can have that sitting up there in the front. They can give it to you to use as long as you're following the instructions, or they may choose to do it themselves. That's up to you guys. All right, so with this, we need to glue this top piece, this cap piece, onto the nose cone. The first thing that I want you to do before you ever glue anything, please take this seriously. Before you ever glue anything, dry fit it first. Dry fit means that you're putting the pieces together, you're pre-assembling it with no glue to make sure that all the pieces fit. Sometimes those pieces might be way too tight, and then you get glue on it and you can't get it in there, and then it sticks. Well, it ruins the build process. So, you know, we want to dry fit first to make sure that everything fits very nicely. All right, so with that being said, coming back down to this is fine. It's a little bit loose, but this is going to work fine. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to apply a band of glue around this, and I'm going to put it inside and glue that together. I know that the instructions say to put the glue inside this, but logically, if I put the glue inside of this and it's too far in, this will never touch the glue, and then this could come apart. If I put the glue on this is going to be squishing into the nose cone, and it's guaranteed that the glue is going to be between the two pieces. The way plastic glue works, it actually melts the plastic. And when you put the two plastics together, the glue has a chemical reaction between the plastic, and it melts both plastics and it welds them together when it finally dries. So if you use too much glue, it will just continue to melt that plastic and melt it, and then it deforms, it won't fit. So, all right, I'm going to open up my plastic cement. I am going to squeeze out just a little bit of glue. I mean, practically gravity is already pulling some of this glue out. You can see I am not using a lot of this glue. I am not squeezing hard on this. I've just got a small amount. Putting it just on the inside edge, setting the glue aside. And now I'm going to take the nose cone and this piece, and I'm going to apply this. And as I'm putting it together, see how I'm wiggling it a little bit? I want to make sure that the glue is on all sides. So that's the process, and you can feel it starting to get a little sticky. And then once you feel that getting a little sticky, that's the time to stop moving it. Let the glue do its job. All right, so this is all set. That's all I had to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a paper towel, or my finger. I don't mind doing that because I can wipe it off with my finger and then wipe it on my paper towel. I am not going to be wiping it on my clothes, so don't upset your parents. Be very careful about getting glue on your clothes. So I'm going to wipe this off. I need to keep this part of the nose cone safe from glue, because this part is going to go inside the body tube, so I need to make sure that that doesn't have a lot of glue buildup around it, so it goes in and out nicely and easily. All right, so I am done with that. I'm going to set this aside. I would not put this in your Ziploc baggie yet because that glue is still wet. So I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to let that cure and do its thing. I'm going to put the cap back on the glue and then hand this back to the teacher or whoever else you need to use it. All right, coming back down to the instructions, step 1, gluing that piece on. We are done, and done. So I am done with that step. The next step, step 2, is talking about our fins, preparing our fins. Those fins are in that same baggie. Opening up the Ziploc baggie, same baggie, it's that little square piece of wood. We can pull this out. Okay, so square piece of wood, and you should have 3 fins that have been laser cut into this piece of balsa wood. They are talking about on step 1, sand both sides of this. That's a choice, that's up to you. You don't have to sand it if you don't want to. I personally probably would not do that, but if you do, what I like to do is take a sheet of sandpaper and just sand with the grain of wood. The grain of the wood means the lines in the wood. See how the lines are going this direction? You always want to sand with the grain, not against it. So they're just talking about taking a little layer off of that. We are not sanding a lot. We're not sanding it down. We're just taking a layer just to basically just to clean it up a little bit. And that's it. All right. I mean, that was it. And, you know, again, you don't have to do that. You can skip that step and move on. The next step, they're talking about using a hobby knife to cut out the fins. Your teacher's build box has a hobby knife in it, but because those are sharp, only your teacher is going to use that, and you should not be using these. But I don't think that you need to use a hobby knife to cut that out. I have never had to use one because I can simply just push on the fins and they can pop right out themselves. Just like that. Okay. If the outside frame breaks, that's okay. Just like that broke off, that's okay. That's garbage. But we don't want the fin to break. So I am just rocking these back and forth. There are little tabs that hold the wood in place. So rocking it back and forth like that and just breaking them free. Again, this stuff is garbage, so that can be thrown away. All right, so we did a light sanding, that's optional. We got them out of the square, and now they want us to put these all together in the same shape, all lined up so that the edges are all even. And what they want us to do is they want us to sand what's called the root edge of our fin. The root edge is the edge that is going to attach to the body tube. Think about the roots of a tree. The roots of a tree hold the tree in place. The root edge of the fin is going to hold it onto the body tube. So that root edge needs to be clean without those little bumps. That little piece of wood that's right there, that needs to be sanded down. So we're going to take the sandpaper, lay it on your desk, and we're going to run this back and forth. And you'll see some dark sawdust coming off of it because the wood has actually been burned by the laser. So that dark sawdust coming off of that is actually the burnt part of the wood. So get that all cleaned off. It's important to keep these square. The root edge should not be sanded round. So when you're sanding, don't sand and tip it back and forth. Keep it perfectly square. I'm going to go ahead and sand the rest of those fins. I want to clean up the little notches, and I'm just going to sand those all down until they're almost all clean. That's good. And I like it. Okay, that's good. All right, so we have sanded. There's one more thing that I really want to do with this that you should get in the habit of doing, and that's marking your root edge. So this is the edge that the rocket is going to be attached to. So I'm going to go ahead and just place little marks on the root edge so that when it comes time to glue, I don't get confused of how I'm going to glue this on. I know where my root edge is at. These fins are pretty easy because they're pretty cool looking fins, and you can kind of tell how they're going to go on. But there are some fins that you can't really tell. It's hard. It could go this way and it could go this way, and you know, I mean, well, you could attach these fins onto the body tube so it looks like that, couldn't you? But that's not the way the kit was designed. So we want to mark the root edge so it goes on like this, so we know it's going to fly the way that it was built to. Okay, so that's the reason I like to mark the root edge of our fins. All right, so coming back down to the instructions we've sanded, optional, we cut those out, we cleaned up the root edge, we marked the root edge, and now looking at this step is optional. It's asking you to round the leading edge, And the reason that they're asking to do that is as the rocket is traveling up through the air, the air is going to be passing over top of the leading edge, and this squared off area will create more aerodynamic drag. In your force and motion unit, you learned about friction. Well, aerodynamic drag is friction, except going through the Earth's atmosphere. The faster the rocket goes, the more friction there is, and we know that friction causes heat and it slows things down. So the faster this rocket goes, the more friction, the slower this is going to go, and it can reduce the height that the rocket flies. And it could, if the fin is not glued on properly, it could create so much friction. The thrust of the motor is pushing the rocket up and the friction is pulling this down. It could rip that fin right off your rocket, and then your rocket becomes unstable and, you know, spins through the air. So attaching these and getting them prepared, I'll guide you through that and we'll make sure that that stays put. All right, so rounding the edges of your fin, if you want to, you can. It just requires a little bit of sandpaper and round those corners so that it's round and smooth, you know, round like your pencil is. Again, it's optional. We're not approaching the speed of sound, so we really don't have any issues with that. You can do it if you want to, but it's not necessarily a thing that you need to do. So you could skip that if you want to. It does make the rocket look nicer though, to round the leading edge. Warning, do not round your root edge. Do not round your root edge. This has to stay square so we can attach that do not. We marked it, do not touch it, do not round that. Keep that square and flat. You can round the other edges, do not round that root edge. Okay, deal? All right, let's move on. I'm going to put these fins off to the side for right now. I'm going to put those in my bag. We'll use those in just a little bit. So the next step, we have taken care of the fins. We've prepared those. The next step is for us to cut out a piece of paper and to mark our body tube. We are going to mark lines on our body tube so we know where our fins are going to go, and we're going to use those lines as guides to make sure that our fins are perfectly straight, because we want straight fins. So with this, it talks about marking this and wrapping this around the tape, around your body tube, but the first thing that we have to do is we've got to cut it out. And that is way back here on the front. Okay, so when I come back here, this is your tube marking guide. Now, the problem with that is that if I cut this out, the back side of that has instructions to follow to insert your thrust ring into your rocket body tube. This is an important step, and if I cut this out, I'm going to be missing those instructions. So to avoid that problem, I have made copies of this, and your teacher will have this in her build box. So she will pass this out. You can cut the marking guide out of this sheet. It's exactly the same, but you'll cut it out of this sheet, not your instructions, so that you don't mess up the instructions in those steps. Okay? So you should have one of these in your on your desk right now, or a piece of that. We are going to cut this out, so we need our scissors, and I am going to cut along the outside dark line, along that black line. So I am cutting this line along this one, and finally along that one. Do not cut this shaded part out. Leave that part, but cut along the black line around that, so you can see where to cut all the way around those edges. Okay? All right, so we've got that set. What we're going to do now is we're going to have to pull our body tube out of the bag. The body tube is just what that is. It's the body tube of the rocket. Looks like this. Please take care of this. I have seen students accidentally drop it just when another student takes a step. Secure this from rolling off your desk. Protect this. If this gets stepped on, crushed, or bent, or dinged, it could affect the strength of your rocket, and when you take the rocket out to Rocket Day, the flight line, our range safety officer may look at it and shake their head and go, no, no go, because we prioritize safety first. We want to make sure that those rockets are going to be flying safe. So keep this safe, okay? Don't bite on it, don't chew it, don't step on it, don't sit on it. Believe me, I've seen that happen. Students sit on it. And so protect this. All right, so what we're going to do with this is we're going to take the marking guide and we are going to wrap the marking guide around the body tube. Okay, and I'm going to bring this down to the other camera so that you can see it. We are going to wrap this around the body tube, and the shaded part here is going to be the overlap. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to overlap this, but I want those lines to match up. So I'm going to move this around a little bit until I get those lines to match up. Just like that. I mean, I think that looks really nice. So I've got that set. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a piece of clear tape, or in my case, I've got some masking tape that I'm going to use, and it's a small piece of masking tape. I don't need much. I'm not holding anything together really. I'm just holding it so it doesn't come apart. All right, and that's it. Now I could take this off, but I need it on there to do my marking, so I'm going to leave it on. And when I'm marking, I've got this line that's dotted LL, and this is for the launch lug. This is not a fin line, this is for the launch lug. I rotate it, I've got FL, that's the fin line. I rotate it through, I've got another fin line. I rotate it past the seam, and I've got a fin line under that tape. Okay, so I need to mark those line locations on my body tube, but I want to make sure that this marking guide doesn't move as I'm marking. So I'm going to take another small piece of tape and I'm going to place it on the end here, and I'm going, this isn't going to move now. It doesn't twist, it doesn't rotate, I've got it secure. So now I can go ahead and start marking. You have a pencil and you can use your pencil. For video purposes, I'm going to use a fine point marker so that you can see a little bit better. Sometimes pencil doesn't show up as well. So here's my fin line. Here's another fin line. See, I'm just placing a small mark down there. This is my launch lug line. I'm going to put a mark here and a mark here so I know that's my launch lug line. I'm rotating it again. Here's FL, so that's another fin line, and rotating, and I am done. I've got all three fin lines marked, and I've got my launch lug line marked as well. And that is calling that step done. I can peel off this tape, put that aside. I can pull this off now. If somebody else is having a hard time getting theirs wrapped around and you want to let them use this, they can use this as well. And there's another step a little bit further that I use it to kind of help with, and so don't throw it away. Keep it handy, so don't throw that away. All right, coming back, where are we at with the instructions? Coming back to this, we wrapped the marking guide around, we marked the fin guide, the launch lug line, and now we have to take the body tube over to the door and mark the lines, extend those lines across the entire body tube. Okay, so we're ready to do that. Before we do that, I want to go back to that line that we marked as the launch lug line, and I want to put some X's. I need to identify this as the launch lug, so I'm going to put L here, L. So I know that that's the launch lug line, and I can even put some X's in here like this between it so that I know do not glue a fin on that line. I am going to glue the launch lug on there at a later time, not the fins. Okay, those are my fin markings. Here's another fin mark. Here's another fin mark. This is for the launch lug. And by doing this, it also helps me identify which end of this body tube is going to be the business end where the engine goes, and which end is the pointy end where the nose cone goes. And always remember, the pointy end always goes up, right? Okay, so I've got that marked. We're all set. Now we need to take this over to, I would recommend taking it over to your door. What we need is a 90-degree angle, something that has a 90-degree angle to draw a straight line across the entire length of that body tube. You can't do it with a ruler. If you try to draw this with a ruler, the ruler ends up moving sideways. It's crooked halfway through. If you do get it straight halfway through, it's going to bend. It doesn't work. You're going to waste a lot of time and set yourself up for failure. It doesn't work. You need a 90-degree angle to place this round, cylindrically shaped body tube into so that it stays steady and you have a straight edge to draw that line. And the best place that you have is your door. You've got two doors that you can go to in your room, and all you have to do is walk over and place this in the metal frame of that door and then draw your line down. There's another area in your room. Your teacher has a bookcase. That little area right underneath the ledge is a perfect place to be able to draw a nice straight line because that's a 90-degree angle as well. I have a piece of angled aluminum that I use, and I'm going to use that here to do this and show you the process, but you're going to do the same thing but at your door. You're going to place your body tube up against the side of the door in that 90-degree notch, just like I did with this. You're going to rotate that mark so that the edge of your pencil, so that that line and your pencil match up with the mark that you just put on. And then you're going to just draw back and forth, placing that mark. And again, I'm going to use this. Make sure that you are holding it firmly in place, but not so hard that you crush it. And you're going to have to get your little fingers out of the way. You cannot draw a straight line and then draw around your finger. So you've got to hold it so that your fingers are out of the way so that you can draw that straight line. Okay, so once you've drawn that line with a pencil, you're going to have to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, make sure that it's dark enough for you to see. We're now going to rotate this until you get to the next line. So we're rotating that. We're taking the tip of our pencil and we're matching it up over the top of that mark, and then we're going to run the pencil down the body tube. Again, keep your fingers out of the way, hold the body tube in place so that it doesn't move. You can't move this. Rotate it to the next line. Now we're doing the launch lug line. I'm going to do that one with pencil just so that it looks a little bit different and show you how, because I've got to go back and forth on this one. Okay, so that's how we do it with the pencil. Rotate and come back around to the other line. I am matching up the line with my pencil, keeping my fingers out of the way and drawing my straight edge down. And that's how we draw the lines on the body tube. Okay, so you return back to your seat, double check your lines, sight down that line, close one eye and look at that. That line should be perfectly straight all the way down. Rotate it, check the other line. All of those lines should be perfectly straight right down the body tube. And how you do that, you need that 90-degree angle to fit the round cylindrical shaped body tube in there, and that's the magic. That's the magic right there. All right, so nice straight lines. moving on. We are now done marking our line. And the next step in the build process is to attach the fins. Okay? Except, I don't like attaching the fins first. I want to skip this step. So I'm going to say that I'm skipping this step and I want to go down to the next step. So we're going to swap those two steps. We're going to insert the thrust ring first and then we'll come back and add the fins onto it. My logic is I'm going to be working with something with the back end of my body tube, gluing some stuff in there. I don't want the fins in the way. I want to be able to grab it with my hand and be able to manipulate stuff without the fins in the way. I've seen fins get broken, and it's just better. It's a better process to do it this way. So we're going to skip the fin application for right now. We're going to come back to it next. The next step is this, and this is where we're going to insert a thrust ring into the body tube. The thrust ring is in your bag. It's the same bag with your streamer in it, and it's a little green ring. We're going to take that out, put everything else back in your Ziploc baggie, and we also need the adapter or the spacer, which is the yellow tube. So we're going to need that as well. That should be in your bag as well. You know, if you're looking for it and you say, I don't have a spacer, check inside your body tube. Sometimes they get manipulated inside shipping, you know, inside the bag and during the shipping process, and they end up inside. So it might be inside. And there it is. Okay, there it is. So voila. So you can look at that and figure out where it's at, but this is a piece that we need. This piece does not get glued onto your rocket. It is only used as a spacer. We're going to draw a line on this, and we're going to use this as a spacer to insert and glue the thrust ring. Okay, so this is not part of your rocket, it's only a spacer. This is part of your rocket, and it's a pretty important part because it goes into your body tube, and what the thrust ring does is it blocks the engine from going through your body tube. Sorry about the reach here, but you take your motor, and when you insert your motor, this spacer is a simulation of what the motor, it's the exact same length, the same diameter, it pretends to be the motor. So when you insert the motor in, we want the motor to stick out of the back a little bit of distance, because we're going to have to put a little piece of tape on that right at launch time to hold the motor in there. So we want some of the motor sticking out, but we don't want the motor going all the way through. And the worst thing that can happen is not having a thrust ring in there. That thrust ring stops this motor from going up. So when this thing launches, the motor wants to go all the way through, and if you don't have that thrust ring, the motor will travel up the tube, through the nose cone, it burns everything. It's not pretty, and it's not very safe. So that thrust ring, it's important, okay? So you've got the why. Now we're going to do the how. How are we going to glue this in? All right. The instructions, coming back down to the instructions. The instructions talk about drawing a line 1/4 of an inch in. And we're going to do that because that's important. So we need to do that. So we're going to get our ruler, and we're going to get our spacer, and we're going to draw a line in 1/4 of an inch in. Now let's go ahead and reflect back on our lesson on measurement. 1/4. whether it's fractions or measurement, 1/4 is 1/4. If you are given a candy bar and you get to eat 1/4 of it, you're going to break that candy bar into 4 equal parts. So 1/4 of an inch is 1 inch divided into 4 equal parts. Okay? So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to lay this across my my ruler, and I've got my finger inside the body, or inside that spacer to help hold it. I've got 1 inch. I'm going to divide this into 4 equal parts, so I know where the 1/2 inch, so that's 2, and if I divide that again into 1/4, I know that 1/4 of it is right there. Okay? It's a little hard to see with my ruler, but it's right there. So I've marked that. I'm going to insert my spacer back inside the body tube, and I'm going to slide it down to that mark, and I'm going to use the body tube to extend this line all the way around it. That way I know exactly where this is at, and I know this is my stopping point. I am not allowed to take this any further than that. So when I go to insert this in, I'm going to insert it up to that line and I stop. Okay? So that's why we're drawing that line. All right, so I have that set. We are good with 1/4 of an inch in. So check. Step number 2. Step number 2 talks about putting glue 2 inches inside the body tube. Okay, 2 inches. I am not going to do the 2-inch thing. Okay, and I'll explain why. We're going to put glue, definitely going to put glue, but we're not going to put it 2 inches in, we're going to put it 1 inch in. And the reason that I like to put it 1 inch in is this. If I'm going to put this thrust ring in, if I'm putting this thrust ring in, and I'm going to go 2 inches, which is going to be the end of this tube. So if I put the glue way up in here, then when I go to push this in this far, that thrust ring has encountered no glue. It's not gluing yet. If I push it this far, there's no glue. If I push it this far, it might start to encounter some of the glue, and then finally when I get to that point, it is just now bumping up against the glue. But think about, this thing fits really tight inside there, so that thrust ring is acting as a bulldozer right now. It is literally bulldozing the glue out in front of it and pushing it away. So the glue may not have had enough time to get underneath the thrust ring to glue the two surfaces together because it pushed it forward out of the way. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So what I want to do is I want to put the glue in a little bit further back, and I'm just going to put it in as far as the nozzle will go, and I'll just push it in from there. That way I make sure that the glue is bulldozing through it and the glue is spilling over the top and it's getting underneath and it's completely getting itself around the part that we want to glue in. We want to make sure that that is glued. If it's not glued in properly, the thrust of the motor could break it loose and shoot through the nose cone, and you know, we can laugh at that, but it's just not cool when it's your first rocket and you're really wanting to have a successful flight. Okay, so we're going to use Elmer's glue with this project. Elmer's glue is a good glue to use for some of these objects. It doesn't set up really fast, so it gives you time to move things around. So this is a good piece to use. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stick this in as far as I can, and I'm just going to squeeze a ring of glue, just rotating the body tube as I am doing this. All right, and if you can see inside the ring of glue that I have in there, So as I'm rotating the body tube, you can see what it looks like and how much glue I've got. And that is it. Notice that I've kept this area right here clean. I don't have any glue in there. But I've got glue about 1 inch in, so when I go to put this in and bulldoze through that glue is going to end up getting underneath the thrust ring and in front of it, around it. I am guaranteeing that that's going to glue in nicely. Okay, now, before you apply any glue, I want you to test fit this first. Take this thrust ring and put it inside the body tube and test to make sure that it fits. We call that dry fitting, remember? That needs to be in there. If this doesn't fit and it's really, really tight, what do you think, and I dropped mine, what do you think it's going to do when you apply glue? If it's tight getting that in without glue when it's dry, when you attach the glue to it, when you put the glue to it, it's going to be even worse. And this has to go in smoothly in one motion. If you are struggling to get that in, then we can do something, we can sand, we can do something to make sure that that goes in. Mine works just fine. I don't have a problem with it. If it goes in a little bit tight, you can use your fingernail to push down on the edges. Sometimes the edges get flared up, and that can cause it to be a little tight. But just kind of almost like you're scraping down the edges, and my fingers are, so yep, that fits much better. Okay, so this is called dry fitting. We're making sure that the pieces fit. Okay, so I have my glue in already. I put that ring of glue. I've got this just sitting right on the edge. I did not push that into the glue yet. And I've got my body tube ready to go. It's just sitting here. My spacer is ready to go. It's just right there ready. Now, what I want to do with this is I want this to be all one fluid motion. Don't put it in halfway and then pull it out and go, I wonder if there's glue on that, and look at it, because that glue will set up and it will lock that in place, and then your motor won't be able to insert all the way in. This needs to be one complete motion all the way in and through, right down to that line. Almost practicing this down to that line. I even put my finger right there so that I can practice this, kind of develop some muscle memory. Boom, to that line, pull it out, practice that so that you get that motion down, so that when it comes time to do it with glue, it counts. The worst thing that you can do is to push this in and push it all the way in like that. That is going to be a little difficult for us on the flight line to be able to secure that motor. You don't want to push that all the way in. You want it up to that line. So practice pushing this up to that line and stop. Practice pushing up to that line and stop. Sometimes a student will accidentally push it too far because they get just to the point where it starts to get in, it gets a little hard, and then boom, it goes in, and you're like, ah! So if that happens to you, just be prepared to get it to your teacher as fast as possible, because we don't want that glue to secure that in place where it's at. And even if that does happen and you push that in too far, come and talk to me, because I can figure out a way that I can get another piece in there to block it. And I mean, it's repairable, it's fixable. So as long as the body tube is intact, we can fix anything on the inside. If in the event that you do push that in too far, I have a stick that fits inside the body tube nicely, so you should be able to take this stick and push that thrust ring out without damaging too much. So your teacher will have this in the build box. This is for emergency purposes only, and it's the Wizard stick. So if you do have that happen, you should be able to push that out, and then we can restart by putting that back in with the with the spacer and do it properly. So, but for emergency uses only, you have the one and only Wizard stick. I have my thrust ring in, I have the body tube in, I'm holding it in place, and in one motion I'm going to push this all the way in. I can feel it hitting the glue, and I'm pushing, pushing, pushing. Oh, got a little stuck right there, and boom, there it goes. And that is in place, so it is right up against that line. I'm pulling that out. There's no glue on it. All right, and the thrust ring is inside. It is safe right where it's at. It's important that we don't mess with that. Let the glue set up in there. What does it look like inside? I am going to get a light for you so that we can see what it looks like on the inside, and hopefully be able to get in there to be able to see from this angle. So I don't know if we're able to see that or not, but we should be able to see that the thrust ring is in there. Remember that that motor has to go in to this section, and if you've got glue sitting in there, then this motor will not be able to go in there. This motor has to be able to go in up to that point, okay? So make sure that we've got that nice and clean. You can get your finger in and move that around. If you can't do that, you can get your pencil in and you can clean up some of the glue that's in there. You know, a stick or something. Just don't move the thrust ring when it's in there. Okay, so I notice that I've got a little bit of glue in there, so I'm going to clean that up. Not bad, it's not bad, but there's a little bit of glue. All right, so we've got the thrust ring in place. Hopefully you did not have any issues with doing that, and everything is good right where it's at. I think it was a success. My side of it went very well. And boom, I'm just kind of double checking to make sure. Now what we need to do is let that rest and let that set in there. So everything is looking good. The thrust ring is in. I know that it's glued in. Check mark on that. And we are ready to come up and start gluing on our fins. This is an exciting part for me because this is when they rocket, this tube starts to actually look like a real rocket. But in order to do that though, we're going to have to measure. It talks about this being 3/8 of an inch or 10 millimeters, and we need to find the 3/8. So we need to come in 1/8, 2/8, and 3/8. And that is going to set us right about, let me see, 3/8, that's that. We're going to set it about right there. So I'm going to hold my body tube, and I am going to mark 3/8 of an inch in on my body tube. Okay, 3/8 of an inch, I placed the mark. And now what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to use that paper tube, the marking guide that I told you to hang on to. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to make a circle around this. So with that mark that I made, I'm going to take my pencil, or in this case my pen, and I am going to draw a circle all the way around it so that I have a line around the body tube. Okay, and it looks like this. I can take this paper off now, and I have a line 3/8 of an inch. Okay, now take a look at this body tube. Do you notice how shiny it is? They probably put some kind of a wax over the top of it so that they can keep the moisture out, so that the body tube is protected. But the problem with that is that waxy substance on there, that prevents glue from really adhering to it. So what I want to do is I want to take a piece of sandpaper, and you may have that sheet of sandpaper. You can use this, kind of fold it, and then what I want to do is I want to lightly sand each one of those lines. Just sand right on the line. Don't sand a lot of material off, just scratch it up a little bit. The launch lug line, we don't have to sand down here, but I'm going to sand a little bit up here because this is where the launch lug is going to go. It's going up a little bit further. Okay, I am just sanding just to scratch off some of that shiny stuff. I am not sanding away any material. All right, so I've got my fins marked with the root edge. My fins are ready. The surface area here is ready. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Titebond 2 glue. This is quick setting glue. It sets quickly, and this is what carpenters use when they're building furniture. This does not unscrew, it pulls, so you're going to pull that. Squeeze a little bit, listen for the air to pass through. You should hear some air. If you don't hear air, the tip of it's probably plugged. We are not using a lot of this glue, guys. We are going to use just a small amount on our tip of our finger. So I'm going to take this little amount right here, squeeze this out, and boom. That's it. That's all I need. And I jokingly refer to that as a bloopful. Okay, so we're going to take this fin, we're going to hold our fin with the root edge up, and I am going to run a bead of glue straight down that fin. I'm getting a nice amount on there, but not too much. I still have extra on the tip of my finger that I didn't even use, and that I'm going to wipe off on my paper towel. All right, so I've got this on here. Now, I know that this is the business end of my rocket. I know that this is where my fins go. I looked inside, my thrust ring is in here. I've got X's on here, so I know that this is the bottom end and this is the top end where my nose cone goes. So with this, knowing that this is where my fins are going to be attached, I am going to place my fin, the base of my fin, right here. I'm going to place that right on the line, and I'm going to rock this forward, and I'm going to bring the point down on top of the line. So I've got the base on the line, and my point, or the tip, is going to be on the line as well. So I am holding on to it, and I am rocking this forward, and I am matching up the tip with that line. I'm pushing down on it, and I can see the glue squishing out. And I'm going to hold this for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so in order for me to put this on, I'm applying downward force, which means I'm squeezing in on the fin and pushing down on it too. Don't push down on it so much that you crush the body tube, but enough that you get some force down on it. So now what I need to do is I need to relieve that force. So I'm going to slowly release the pressure on it, separate my fingers and pull my fingers away. And I explain that step to you because some students don't get the movement quite right and they end up pulling the fin sideways with it, but you want to relieve the stress, separate your fingers, and then back away from it. Okay, so, and we can see that we've got our fin on. There's a little pile of glue here. I'm just going to run my fingernail across that to clean that up a little bit. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I just like to clean it up. So, all right. If you do that, make sure that you're not pushing on the fin so that you're pushing it over. Now it's important for us to sight down the line. I'm going to pick this up and I'm looking straight down the line, closing one eye and looking down that line to make sure that my fin is perfectly straight. I should not see the backside of the fin here, and I should not see the backside of the fin here. It should be straight down the line. And I actually am a little bit off with this, so I need to move mine in because I'm seeing a little bit of the backside there. So it's not bad, but it's a little bit off. So to move this, I'm just going to take my finger and I'm going to place my finger right on the bottom edge here, and I'm going to just move that just a little bit there. And that is good now. So now I can see it's perfectly straight. And the other thing that I want to look at is I need a shark fin. I need this to be perfectly straight up and down this way. I don't want it crooked, and I don't want it crooked. I want shark fin, and I want it straight. Okay? Because as the air is passing over those fins, they should pass over each side evenly so that it goes straight and it doesn't throw it into a spin. Okay, so my line is right here. My fin is on that line. It's actually a little tiny bit lower. That's okay. All right. Most importantly, it's straight and it's straight. Now, what I can do is, how did you do with this? Were you nervous? Were you shaky doing this? Did you have a hard time getting that? If you had a hard time getting that, you may have been using too much glue, because when I put it down, it pretty much locks in place. It immediately starts to tack up. But if you had too much glue on there, then it's going to slip and slide, and you've got to really hold it steady when that happens. So again, a little bit of glue is better. If you did really well with this, we can move right on to gluing the next fin, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and glue the other fin on. For right now, I can't lay this down. I could, if I'm going to lay this down and let this dry, which if you're having a hard time with it, set this down, let it dry for 15-20 minutes, and then come back and work with the other one. There's nothing worse than trying to get another fin on and then mess this one up and have this one fall off. So let's go ahead and set this aside. I'm going to set this aside on my desk so it's resting like this, okay? And I'm going to put that in a quiet place where there's no wind that's going to blow it over and nobody's going to come along and mess with it, okay? And I'm going to get my next fin prepped and ready to go. So my next fin, I'm going to do exactly the same thing with. I am going to put a small amount of glue on the tip of my finger. I am going to run this glue across the top of the fin, and I'm just pulling the glue back on the fin. Okay, that's all I'm doing. Wiping the extra off of my finger. I am just getting a good amount of glue on there. Okay, I am ready to glue this on my rocket. So I am going to carefully pick up my rocket with the fin, and I am going to hold it in my hand so that it rests against my palm, and I am going to place the back end against that line, and I'm going to rock the nose, the point of it, forward, pushing down. I can watch the glue squish out, and now I'm just going to hold it there for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so I am squeezing in on the fin. I am pushing down on the fin. So I want to reverse that action. I want to let up on my pressure on the fin, and I'm going to separate my fingers, pull my hand away, and I'm allowing the glue to do the work. Cleaning up that edge a little bit. I can tell that this fin did not go on quite as firmly as the other. Let's double check. I'm going to sight down that line, and that looks really good to me. It is perfectly straight. I'm looking straight down that line, and the fin falls in line. I'm not seeing the back of this side, and I'm not seeing the back of that side. It's straight, and I have shark fin. Boom, it's good. And I did not mess with that fin at all. Okay, so again, take this, set this off to the side so that it's not going to be bumped or touched. The worst thing is to have that fall over and have the fins go and break off. And I'm going to prepare my last fin to glue on. A little bit of glue goes on. I'm holding the fin, and I'm going to run this glue down the edge of that, just like that. wiping off the extra glue that was on my finger. Easy, easy. Now I'm going to go over to my to my rocket, grab my rocket. Please handle this gently. You don't want to be flinging this around. Your movements need to be slow and deliberate. Remember that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Remember those rules that you learned in Force and Motion. And those things at rest want to stay at rest unless there's a force that acts on it. So if you grab hold of the body tube and you quickly move the body tube, the fins want to stay at rest. They want to stay right where they're at. The body tube wants to move, but the fin wants to stay there. And, well, the fin can fold and fall off. So we move everything slowly when we're dealing with this. Okay? So I have this, being real careful with this one this time. I have this base of the fin on that bottom line, and I am going to rock this forward. See how that glue squishes out? And then I am making sure that the tip of my fin is lined up on the line, and I'm just going to count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you feel like you have to count longer, that would be fine. I'm going to release the pressure on the fin, separate my fingers and pull them away. I am going to clean up any globs of glue that might have squished out. Like, see, there's a big glob right there. So, and sometimes I'll use my pencil and get my pencil in there just to smooth that out. Okay, now let's sight down the line and see. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's embarrassing. That's horrible. Do you see what's wrong? Yeah, let's take a look at it this way. Maybe you'll be able to see it better this way. If I'm sighting down that fin, do you see it's not straight? It's like this. All right, so how do I fix that? Easy. I'm going to just take the top of this and very carefully just bend it back straight up and down like that. And now we're back squared. It's straight up and down. So you saw how I did that. I just took the top of it and moved the top section of it without moving the bottom. And everything else looks really good. I'm just double checking to make sure that it's seated there. And this looks good. It's straight and it's straight. So I've got a straight fin for aerodynamics, and I've got the shark fin coming straight up and down, so this looks nice. I am done gluing my fins, and see, I told you so. Doesn't that look really cool? Aren't you getting excited? Because, oh, but don't shake it around too much. Easy does it, because this has to still glue. But yeah, and now when you take your nose cone, dude, it's a rocket, right? All right, I'm removing the nose cone. We need to let this rest. I'm going to set this off to the side where it can rest. We cannot rest it like this because the weight of that will break the fins off. We can't rest it on our desk like this because it'll flatten it. It's got to be resting like this. So I'm setting that off to the side. And the next step up here is to glue the launch lug on. Now, to glue the launch lug is in this bag, and it's in the bag with your streamer, and it's that little piece that looks like a straw. Okay, so it's the same exact process that we just went through. We're going to glue this on exactly the same way. I need that piece of sandpaper, and I am going to just sand the straw a little bit. I don't want to take material off, but I just want to scratch that up a little bit. You know, it's a good rule of thumb. Anytime that you are going to glue anything, just sand the surfaces just to scratch it up and remove some of that shiny stuff. Okay? We're not taking off material. We're just scratching it so that the glue has something to hold on to. Okay, so I am going to take a little bit of glue on the tip of my finger, just like I did before, and I am going to now take my launch lug. I'm putting my fingers over the ends of it, and I'm just going to run some glue across like that. That's it. Now I'm going to reach over and carefully with my rocket, I am going to move slowly with it. I am going to place this launch lug on top of the launch lug line. Okay? And do you see where the fins, the tip of the fins are at? That's a good indicator of where about you should place it. So where those fins start, where the fins, the tip of those fins are at, your launch lug can go anywhere in that area. You don't want it way up here at the top, but any place in this area is going to be fine. All right, so I've got this glued on, and now I'm going to sight down that line just like the fins, and I want to make sure that the launch lug is straight. And it looks straight to me. Okay, good. Here's another area of concern. So, warning, okay? Take a look at that launch lug and look inside the launch lug. Do you have any glue on the inside of it? If you do, let's get something and clean that glue out, because we can't have glue in there. The purpose of the launch lug is it is going to go on a launch rail. When you go out to the field, you're going to walk out to the launch pad, and there's a metal rod, and this is going to fit over top of that metal rod, and that metal rod has to go up inside the launch lug. The reason for this, these rockets are fin stabilized, which means the fins are what give it the stability to fly in a straight line. Without the fins, this thing would not fly at all. So fin stabilized rockets need air passing over top of them. This rocket has to be going at least 30 miles an hour in order for the fins to engage and steer it. If you just take this rocket, set it on the driveway or set it out in your yard and then light it, it's not stable at all. It could flip and do circles before it gets a little forward momentum and the fins start to take control. But by that time, it could end up going sideways and shoot sideways straight into a crowd of people. And that would be dangerous, and we're not going to have that. So we have to have a rod, a launch rod to put this on. When you get into the bigger rockets like you see behind me, they have launch buttons, and those go on heavy metal rods that are even more stable. So the bigger rockets you get, the bigger the launch pad and structure you have to have. So make sure that this is clean so that I can get that rod in and out. I have had in the past students come out and they've had glue in there, and I can't get this on the launch pad. They can't launch. It's sad. So make sure that there's no glue in there and you'll be okay. All right, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to set this aside and let that completely dry. We've got the launch lug in, so check mark on that. The next step is to cut out our shock cord, and I'm just going to do a rough cut right now just to get that out of the instruction manual. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut on the black line. I'm just going to cut around it like this, and you can see that I'm not paying real close attention. It's a ballpark. It's, about where it's at. So I'm not being real picky about it, but that is what we need. Okay, so in order to attach the shock cord to this, we're going to need our shock cord. The shock cord is in with the streamer, that orange object. I'm going to pull the shock cord out. Now, you're probably saying, Mr. Horvath, that's not a shock cord. I don't know what a shock cord is, but that's a rubber band. This is not a rubber band. It might look like a rubber band, but it's not. Okay, it's a shock cord, and we need to use it for what it's meant for. It is not a rubber band, so this should never be seen flicking somebody in the face with or shooting stuff with. It's not a rubber band. Please don't treat this like that. It is a shock cord. I don't want anybody hurt, and I don't want your teacher looking at you and writing a pre-referral for it and taking your rocket away. Okay, so this is a shock cord. The purpose of the shock cord is to attach to the body tube of your rocket and your nose cone and the parachute. This is kind of an elastic shock absorber type thing. It's kind of like a leash. It keeps your nose cone and parachute together with your rocket so that it all comes down at one time and it lands safely so that you can fly it again. In our case, it's not a parachute, it's a streamer, so we'll attach the streamer to this too. Okay? So, we understand about that. Please don't treat this like a rubber band. Okay, so in order to do this, what I need to do is I need to place my shock cord on this piece of paper diagonally. Okay, so it's going to go from the upper left-hand corner down to the bottom right-hand corner like this. Just like that. Okay, except I'm going to put a little bit of glue on it so that this will stick in place. And when I'm saying a little bit of glue, I mean a little bit of glue. Okay, we don't need a lot of glue with any of our steps. So I'm going to take some glue in the upper left-hand corner, and I am going to slowly allow it to flow out, and I'm moving it diagonally down across. Okay, and that actually is quite a bit of glue, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my shock cord, after I have the glue on there, I'm going to place the shock cord on this diagonally, and I'm going to press the shock cord into the glue. Have you heard me say that you don't need to use a lot of glue? Have you heard that? Okay. I want to make sure that you're getting that because that's pretty important. And this is important too, because if you use too much glue, you're going to see it. This little piece of paper is going to disintegrate. It's going to become soggy with glue. It's going to become waterlogged with glue. It's going to become sticky. The paper is going to stick to your fingers. It's going to come apart on you, and it's going to be a mess. And it's going to be all over your fingers. And if that happens, okay, let's do it right the first time though. Don't use a lot of glue. Follow those instructions. A little bit of glue is okay, and you'll be able to use this. If you use too much, it's going to come apart. My best advice then is to clean it off of the shock cord. Just take that all off, throw it away. Get another piece of paper. You can even use notebook paper, and you can cut out a similar shape that you just cut out. And it could even be rectangular. It doesn't have to be this exact shape. And then just put it kitty corner, just like diagonally, just like I showed you, and you're going to start over again. But my advice is to do this right the first time, okay? Just a little bit of glue. See, and with that little bit of glue, this is already starting to tack up and stick. So we're good with this. What we're going to do is we're going to fold this, and when we fold this, we want to fold it so that the shock cord is not over the top of each other, where we've got this bulge sticking up inside the body tube of the rocket. When you look inside this rocket is not very wide as it is. So the diameter of it is kind of small. So there's not a lot of space inside. So we don't need something in there getting in the way. We want the payload, which is your streamer and your shock cord, to come in and out of this easily. Okay, so this is why we're going to lay this flat. We're going to, when we fold this over, this section is going to lay in here next to this section, so it lays flat. Okay, so we're ready to fold this now. I'm going to take just a dab more glue, just a little bit right there and a little bit right there. And I'm going to use this and I'm going to put a small film of glue. I'm taking that and I'm wiping it down, and I'm taking this little dab of glue and I'm wiping it up. Again, it doesn't take a lot of glue because if you use a lot, it gets all messy. It literally will disintegrate in your hands. All right, now I'm going to take this. I am going to try to keep the glue off of my fingers, and I'm going to fold this down to that line. And I'm going to pinch it. And this is where you need to keep the glue off of your fingers. If you get a little bit of glue as you're pinching it on your finger, then let's go ahead and draw it. Friction back and forth creates heat, and the glue dries and flakes right off. Okay? All right, so you see how I'm doing that? I'm just pinching that down. I am attaching the paper. Some glue will sneak out of the side of that, but I'm keeping the glue off of my fingers so that it is not going to stick on the paper. All right, I'm going to fold this down one more time, all the way down here, making sure that the shock cord is coming out of the bottom right-hand corner of it like that. And I am just going to press this down, pressing it down, pressing it down. You can see when I press that down, a little bit of glue squeezed out of the top. Again, that's okay. Dry it off, and that goes away. And I am squeezing the paper together so the paper is together and glued. The shock cord, if you look at the shock cord in here, you can see where it started here. It comes down, makes the bend, comes up, makes the bend, and comes down to the rest. And it's all flat. It's all flat. And I do not have a mess. Okay. And again, there probably will be somebody in your room that has used too much glue, and right now it's all over the place. And if that happens, to walk over to the sink, wash your hands off, wash your shock cord off, get that paper off of it the best that you can, and we'll start all over again. Okay? It's not the end of the world, man. It's not the end of the world. Have I ever done it? Of course I have. That's why I know how to do it and how to avoid having that happen. We're ready to go. So I am now ready to glue this into my body tube. Let's go back to our instructions and see where we're at. We glued the shock cord, that was done. I cut this out, I put glue and I placed that diagonally. I folded this over, I pinched it, and now they're saying that we can put some glue on top of the paper and put it inside the body tube. They're showing to put this inside the body tube at least 1.5 inches. Okay, about 1.5 inches. And that's fine, okay? That is fine. Here's the most important part. Measuring, I can measure 1.5 inches and know where I'm supposed to put it, but why? Why do I need to do that? Why can't I just take this and stick it right on the end of it, right there on the end? Well, here's why. Your nose cone has to be able to fit on there. And if I have that right on the end, my nose cone's not going to be able to slide in. So I have to have this deep enough inside of this so that my nose cone can slide all the way in. And if I take my nose cone and line it up with the ridge, I can see just how far in that has to go. So my policy on that with shock cords is just get it in there as far as you can get it. And then you know that you'll be okay. All right. So I'm going to take some glue and I'm going to put a dab of glue just on the inside. Okay. So I'm putting some glue just on the inside of that, and there's just a dollop of glue sitting right in there. Let's see if I can get that light in there so you can see. Yep, so you see I've got some glue in there. Just like that. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and I'm going to place it inside the body tube. And the reason that I don't want to put the glue on the paper is because if I put the glue on the paper, it ends up getting smeared all the way in. I want to push the paper in with my finger with no glue on it and then press it down into the glue. So I like to put it in the body tube and then press the paper into the glue when it's in place. So I have to use my pinky for this. I'm going to push this back in there as far as I can, and I am pushing it down into the glue. Okay, so this body tube is really, really small, so I'm going to have to use my pencil as well. But I've got it back in place. If your finger is in there and you start to feel the paper of the shock cord mount sticking to your finger, then pull it out, wipe your finger off, and start again. You don't want the paper sticking to your finger because you could end up pulling it out. Okay, so again, I am pushing it down. I've got this tube. I'm pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. All right. So I want to make sure that I'm pushing that down against the body tube so that it is as smooth as possible in there and that I don't have it sticking up. Okay. Now, if we can get in here to see it, what does that look like? Can I get some light in there so you can see what it looks like? So, not bad. It looks like there is a slight area sticking up right there. And I am just going to hold that down a little bit. And that should be good. Most important part is that is in there deep enough so that the nose cone is going to be able to come in and out of it, and I won't have any problems with the nose cone, getting in there. Okay, that's the most important part. All right, so we are done with the shock, attaching the shock cord to the inside of this. This is cool stuff. We are moving along at a really good pace. All right, so this needs to set, this needs to dry. Do not try to place anything else in there. Let that glue completely dry, and we will be good to go for that one. Let's go down to the instructions and look to see where we're at in our instructions. The shock cord, we did all of that. We pinched it and we glued that in. It tells you and it warns you right here, do not glue it on the edge. You need to have space. Okay, so we are almost done. I mean, we are one step away from being flight ready. Okay, very cool stuff. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my shock cord and I am going to attach the nose cone to my shock cord. And this is where I have to tie an overhand knot. Okay. So how do I do that? I'm going to push this over and behind so that it pokes its head through the loop. Okay, let's do that again. So I am pushing it through the nose cone. I always like to rotate it so that the loose end is on the right hand side. So, because I'm right-handed, so I'm going to drape this end. This is the end that goes to the body tube. This is the end, the loose end. I'm going to push it back and then behind, and it pops its head through that loop. I'm going to grab hold of it and I'm going to pull it tight. So not only pulling it tight, but I'm going to pull it tight this way and also that way. Okay? So that's one knot. We need to triple knot this. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to take my loose end over the back side of the end that is attached to the fins, pulling it backwards so that it pops in through the hole, grab it, and pull it tight. I'm going to pull it tight this way, and I'm going to do that one more time. One more time. My loose end is going over top and behind the end tied to the body tube, through the hole, and I'm pulling it tight. So I'm pulling it tight this way, and I'm going to pull it tight that way, pulling it tight, pulling it tight. All right, so this is good. I'm going to snip off a little bit of that extra. I don't want a lot of that sticking up to get in the way, but we want to keep that as short as possible because we want as much of that shock cord on there as we can. I have now attached my nose cone to my shock cord, and I have attached the shock cord to my body tube. Now I have to attach my streamer to the shock cord. Okay, your streamer, that's this orange tape thing that's in here. The streamer, when you look at it, you're probably like, how is this going to slow my rocket down? What happens with this streamer is it creates additional aerodynamic drag. As it ripples in the wind, it kind of flutters back and forth in the wind, and that creates friction, aerodynamic drag through this whole strip. And that slows this rocket down enough that it will land safely. This rocket is so light, it doesn't need a lot of weight. And if you put a parachute on this, the parachute would make it float and hover through the air, and it would just float away. So the parachute brings it down very quickly. One of the cool things that happens with some rockets with streamers is that this actually will form an aerodynamic shape like a wing, and you will watch those rockets come down, and then it forms that shape, and then it starts to fly horizontally across the sky because this whole thing acts like a wing, and it's really, really neat to see that happen. So if you're out and you're watching, look for that to happen while you're out there. It's kind of neat. All right, so how are we going to attach this? Let's go back to the instructions and find out. We double knotted that. I triple knotted it. We then we're going to attach the streamer to our shock cord. And how far down should we attach it? Right here is the measurement, about 2 inches. Okay, so about 2 inches down from the bottom of the nose cone. And again, with that, if you want to measure that, you can, but I can just about guess that that is going to be about 2 inches. So I can put it right there, and I can get my ruler out, lay my ruler down, and measure from that to that, and that is about 2 inches right there. Now, you can use clear tape if you want to for this. I don't have clear tape. I have masking tape. So that's what I'm going to use. So clear tape works, masking tape works. So I'm going to use masking tape because I have that right here. I'm going to pull off some of the masking tape, and I am going to lay this masking tape flat so the sticky side is up. And I am going to lay my shock cord across the masking tape about halfway across the masking tape. About 2 inches up and halfway. Now I'm going to take my streamer, and I'm going to place my streamer just on the other side of my shock cord. I'm going to press that down so that that side of the tape is stuck to it. And I'm going to take this side and I'm going to drape it over top of the other side. and I am rubbing this down, pressing this down. Okay? And I am good to go. I am going to take a bit of a smaller piece and I'm going to place it over the top of that just to reinforce that a little bit. I have seen the shock cord tear through the tape before. By double taping it, this is not going to happen. And ladies and gentlemen, we are done building the Estes Wizard rocket. You are ready to fly. So you've got your recovery system in it. When this launches off the launch pad, this is going to go up into the air. The thrust is going to push the rocket off the launch pad. That's going through the thrust phase. Then it's going to coast for a little bit so that it'll slow down. It's going to hit apogee, and then it's going to pop the nose cone out. The streamer is going to deploy. It's going to unfold, and this is going to flutter all the way down to the ground, bringing both your rocket and everything back to ground safely so that you can relaunch it again. There's only one other thing that you have to have with this, and that's called recovery wadding. Recovery wadding usually goes in, it comes with your motors that you buy. When you're out at the launch field, though, we'll have all of that stuff out there. And the recovery wadding is fire-resistant material that goes inside your body tube. When you place this motor inside your rocket, we have to tape it in there so that it doesn't pop out. But you've got that thrust phase, and you've got hot gases that are coming out of this rocket motor, okay? And when the rocket motor gets to the deployment phase, it has a small charge of powder in it that blows backwards inside the body tube. That charge, that's hot gases, okay? And those hot gases will melt simple plastic. So those hot gases, you have to have something to protect the parachute and the streamer from those hot gases, otherwise the parachute will melt. And that's that recovery wadding. It is not toilet paper, it's not Kleenex, it has to be flame resistant, okay? And so this stuff that goes in it, it's coated with a material that resists fire. And that's the important part. You want to protect your parachute and streamer from those hot gases. That is very, very important. So we'll put the recovery wadding in. We will fold up and roll your stuff in. We'll attach the parachutes. If you've got a parachute, we'll attach all of that in. I mean, not the parachute, your streamer. We'll attach the streamer, roll the streamer up, put that all in, and hand it to you, flight ready for you to walk out to the launch pad and put it on the pad. You get to count down 3, 2, 1, and you get to watch your rocket head up to the sky. And I know that you're excited and you're looking forward to it, and so am I. I can't wait to see the builds. I can't wait to see how your rocket flies when it's out there. So until then, I'll see you in the hallway. Let me know how your build is going. If you have any questions, you can always come and talk to me. And you know, the whole idea with this is to show you that this is not hard. It was not hard to build this at all. With the right steps and you know, somebody there to help guide you through that, this is an easy process, and you can do that. So you can go back to Hobby Lobby, walk back in the rockets, pick another rocket kit. You can build that and fly that one. So the build process is not hard, and it's a lot of fun too. So when you get out there. If you are looking for a place to launch and you can't launch your rocket at home, we have a rocketry group. It's called Red Devil Rocketry. We launch rockets the first Saturday of every month. So if you're interested in doing that, get in touch with me and I can give you some additional information and directions and how to get out to the field. We do not launch at the school because we actually do launch some bigger rockets, engines that are up in the E, F, even G size range. So we go from low power to mid power out there. And so if you're interested in that, come on out and join the fun. All right, guys, let me know how your build is going, and I will see you on Rocket Day. 3, 2, 1.